Hola and welcome back to another session of character modeling with me, Steve Moore. And I want to start out today by saying a special thanks to Jason, my friend and subscriber here. Jason, thank you so much, mate. You are awesome. And a special thanks to everybody who subscribed to this channel. We've just hit 1,000 subscribers, man. So Jason reached out to Melissa Hutchinson, the voice actress that played Clementine, and got her to record this really cool cameo for me. I'm hoping I can post it here in the future. I should just make sure it's kosher. Thank you both, Jason and Melissa, if you see this, for doing that. I was blown away. So yeah, in the last session, we took this concept here and fleshed it out in a kind of what I call a symmetrical bind pose. Obviously the reason being that it's easier to mirror things, etc., and save some time. So now I'm going to take all these separate parts, and we're going to pose them. We're going to breathe some life into this sucker. So, and when we're done posing, when I'm happy with the pose, I will use Dynamesh and ZBrush to make one nice contiguous mesh, sculpt over that, finish it off, and that mesh will be able to spit out to substance and finish texturing. All right. So to begin, I'm going to orient the model so it's tilted. Our little dragon is tilted on his proxy rock here, something like the concept. And one thing I'll do here, I combined all the tools into one subtool temporarily just to do this, and using the transpose tool, transpose the whole thing. I'm keeping him still aligned down the x-axis, so that just give yourself as few kind of conundrums as possible. So cool. And then once I'm happy with that orientation, I'm splitting him back up into his various subtools. So once we're reasonably happy with the orientation of our dragon, it's easy enough to separate him back out into his different components. So anyhow, moving on. So we've got our separate pieces. Now it's time to start posing him. Now it gets fun, right? So now we're actually going to start kind of messing with his skeleton. Well, he doesn't have a skeleton, so instead we're using transpose, and we're going to start posing him out. I'm starting with the head, using mask. Basically, you use mask to kind of identify the region that's going to be influenced when you move with the transpose or rotate, and then by blurring your mask, you can kind of get a nice subtle transition, so similar to a rigged model, right? So with the combination of masking and transpose, we're just going through the model, and each time I'm positioning the pivot point of the tool, where I think a joint would be, where I think the neck joint would be, that's where I position the transpose tool, mask it off, and tilt it, twist it. It is a, I don't think it's a laborious process, because I enjoy kind of seeing the model kind of come to life, going from the stiff kind of bind pose, which plagues so many character artists, right? So often we build our characters in these kind of really stiff poses, so it's really nice to be able to kind of break out and kind of sculpt the character in a more of a natural pose. One of my little cheats while I was working on this guy was when it came to getting the hands to grip the rock, I posed the hands, and when I got them where I thought I liked just the gesture and I liked the pose of the hand, I sculpted the rock to fill the hand. I don't think it's obvious I did that, but yeah, that was me cheating. There you go. So now I'm reasonably happy with this pose. It's time to turn him into one object, one contiguous mesh, so we can sculpt over those seams, and so he doesn't quite look like, he doesn't look so much like an action figure anymore. Yeah, and to do that, first I'm going to give him a quick Dynamesh. So before dynameshing, there's a couple of things we need to do to this little dude before we can combine all its subtools and turn them into one mesh. The first thing is make sure that you don't have any active layers. So if you've got any active layers, make sure they're not in record mode. Cycle through. Okay, so far so good. Now we're going to turn on all polypaint data. And you can see where there's a couple of items that are polypaint data and some that are texture. So let's turn on the textures and convert those to polypaint data. Make sure RGB. So we want everything to be polypaint as opposed to texture when we combine these subtools. Here we go. So now merging these subtools. So you go to the subtool palette and you start with the top one and you're going to merge down. So you're going to go to this merge down option. We can leave UVs and weld off and just go merge. I use the merge down option because it seems there's a merge visible, but I've not got that to work. So I just merge them down one by one. Cool. So now we have one subtool. If I turn off the polypaint data for a second and we turn on the poly frame, you can see the various densities of mesh, and if I turn off the line, it's all color coded. You know, this is where I've kind of projected one mesh onto the other. You can see where the wings and the body kind of blend here, and some rather action figure-y kind of seams, which we'll take care of in a minute. Okay, so cool. We've got our body. It's one subtool, various meshes. Next step, Dynamesh. So now we're ready to Dynamesh. Let's turn back on his polypaint data. And I will now duplicate this mesh, and the reason is I'm duplicating is I want to be able to reproject. If I lose any fidelity in the Dynamesh process, I can reproject it later, and that's, you can do that various ways. Down under again in the subtool palette down here, you've got the projection options. Okay, so I'm gonna, and I name this just to keep my sanity, I'll name them too. Like this is the Dynamesh. Dynamesh. Forget my spelling, right? And this one I call project. Which means this is the model I would project on, and we're going to focus on this guy. So going down to the Dynamesh options under geometry, you will find Dynamesh, and I think dial up the resolution. So by default it's 128, which is pretty low. We're going to dial the resolution up because our goal here is not to make an optimized mesh, but just to capture all the detail, and then we're going to quickly remesh again. So 2048 2K resolution is probably a pretty good ballpark, and hit Dynamesh. And there you go. Oopsie, see that's a 128. I lost my settings there. 2048 Dynamesh. Do it. And there you go. It's done. And you can see the Dynamesh is highlighted here. And if I turn off polypaint data, looks the same so far. But when we turn on the lines, you can see now is just one surface. It's very detailed, very dense mesh. It's 2 million, almost 2.5 million polygons right there. Cool. Aha, but here comes the magic. So we've got our Dynamesh mesh. It has polypaint data. Let's duplicate that one more time. I'll put that at the top of the stack. And this one I'm going to call ZBrush. Alright. Now, okay, with our copy of the Dynamesh model active, I'm going to go down to geometry again, and this time I'm going to turn off Dynamesh and go to ZBrush. This is the just the default settings. So my goal here is to make a mesh that I can spit out to Substance Painter and also, reproject all this data on. So it's going to become simultaneously our high-res model and our low. Here we go. Target poly count. Let's just see what we get. Cool. And there you go. This is probably a little bit not quite enough detail for our purposes. So just seeing, I'm just curious. 15,000 polygons, and that's not bad. I think these days you can go as high. I would say 100,000. You could be pretty comfortable making a real-time model. So let's go undo that and dial up the target poly count. 10. Let's try that. Yeah, a little better. So if you imagine this is the silhouette of our low-res model, I think that's good enough for our purposes. We just want to make a pretty static model, so I think that's going to work great. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. So with the ZBrush model still active, I am going to go up to the top of the geometry palette and hit divide, man. And I'll do this a few times. I'll initially, subdivide it a few times. And if we make sure polypaint is on here, that little paintbrush, going back down to the original Dynamesh model, which has all our nice polypaint data, making sure that polypaint is on. I'm hitting transparency, right, on the model that we're going to project on from, and with our new ZBrush model, I'm going to go down to project all. And there we go. Here is our little ZBrush model. He's got poly paint data on. He's a little bit low res, so we're going to need to repeat the process with a couple more subdivisions. Not a problem. Yeah, so that's going to be pretty cool. So we're going to be able to sculpt over this guy, clean up these seams, and done. A few subdivisions and a bit of sculpt over. And here we are, final product in ZBrush, our little dragon dude, and he has subdivision levels. At level 0, we can spit out a model to Substance Painter with UVs and bake the final product, which will be a real-time model rendering in Marmoset. The rock, I'm just going to decimate. I'm not going to fuss with that. And that's it for this session. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for sitting through my little tutorial here, or my little show and tell, I think. Until next time, happy modeling. Ciao.